Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Robyn Gigl about Nothing But the Truth. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Robyn is an award-winning author, attorney, and an LGBTQ+ advocate. Robyn lives, writes, and works in the state of New Jersey.
Correct.
Which is a lovely place to be. And I understand from chatting with Robyn earlier, today's a beautiful day in New Jersey, so I love it.
It is. It is. If I turn to my right, I am looking at the Atlantic Ocean. So.
Oh, all right now. So we're all going to Robyn's house for the view. So Robyn, this is a legal thriller. Will you give the audience a little overview of what this book is about?
Sure. Nothing But the Truth is the fourth in the Erin McCabe series. So Erin McCabe is a criminal defense attorney in New Jersey. She's 35-ish, and she's a transgender woman. And her law partner is a fellow by the name of Dwayne Swisher. And Dwayne is a Black man and a former FBI agent. And they have a law firm where they represent criminal defense attorneys. I said this is the fourth in the Erin McCabe series. I hasten to add that you don't have to have read any of the other three books to enjoy Nothing But the Truth. The best advice my editor at Kensington gave me when I started to write book 2 in the series was make sure it's a standalone, make sure you don't give anything away. So you can pick up Nothing But the Truth without having read the other three and understand everything. Nothing But the... Sorry,
I was going to say that's exactly where I started with book number 4.
There you go. And hopefully it all made sense to you.
It totally did. It does stand alone, Robyn. There's nothing about this book that I needed to have read the first 3. However, it has encouraged me to want to read the first 3 because it is so good.
Oh, well, thank you. So the plot of Nothing But the Truth, it actually sprang from a question that I was asked at a session, a book event that I was doing for the third book, Remain Silent. I was asked a question: could Erin, who is a transgender woman, ever represent someone who was accused of murdering a transgender person? And I was like, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. And so when I sat down to plot out Nothing But the Truth, I flipped the script a little bit. And I mean, I was writing this in a time, not that there's ever been a time where it wasn't an issue, but I mean, we were dealing with Black Lives Matters. There was a lot of issues in terms of white or law enforcement generally, and the Black community in terms of the way they dealt with people of color. And so that was kind of forefront on my mind. And so I flipped the question and said, could Dwayne, who's a Black man, represent a white law enforcement officer who's accused of murdering a Black journalist? And so that's the premise of the book. Erin and Dwayne are retained on behalf of a New Jersey state trooper who is accused of murdering a Black journalist who was doing an expose on a group within the New Jersey State Police called the Lords of Discipline. And a little bit fun fact, there really was a group within the New Jersey State Police, allegedly, that was called the Lords of Discipline. And when I had the original premise, I was unaware of the Lords of Discipline, and I was having brunch with a friend of mine who at the time was a member of the New Jersey State Police. And I was talking to him about the idea for the book. And he said to me, Google the Lords of Discipline.
Wow.
And I did. And I found all this information. I mean, I didn't make the Lords of Discipline up. There was an investigation by the New Jersey Attorney General's office. There's an article in the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, all about the Lords of Discipline. So that is what the book is about. The Erin and Dwayne representing this white law enforcement officer who happens to be the first out and open gay male state trooper who is telling them, look, I was set up for this because the lords are trying to get revenge on me. Yet all the evidence points to the fact that he's the one that murdered the journalist.
So one of the things you do is between Erin and Dwayne, the partners in the law firm, is you give us the knowledge of how close they are as characters in their real life. So, Erin comes to Dwayne and says, is this something we can do? Is this something that we can talk about? And I love that, because I think all of wisdom is gained by when we talk to other people and we talk to them and ask their opinions, solicit it, want to know, what would you think of this? Is this something that we could do? And I loved that. So that was one of the things that we see very early on in the book, is how very close they are and how much respect they have for each other. Because as you said, they are friends, they're colleagues, but they're also very different. They have very lived experiences that are different from each other. And I just thought that what you did with them as law partners was so, I would want them to represent me if I needed representation. So
I would want Erin as well, and Erin and Dwayne. Yes.
Yes. And so, because I think that I'm a big Law and Order fan. So, there are things like gunshot residue, GSR, that most everybody would recognize. But there were things in the legal field that I did not recognize, that I thought that you took such great care in giving us the acronyms, but then explaining to us what those acronyms meant, but in an enlightening way rather than a professor role. So how fun or difficult is that for you, or how important is that for you? Because you are an attorney in real life.
My goal in writing all of these books, Dan, has been to get all of the legal and technical stuff 100% accurate. Whether I've done that or not, I can't swear. I don't know. But one of the nice things is when I do a book event and there's a lot of lawyers there, nobody's ever screaming, "You got this wrong." or from a forensic standpoint saying, "No, you can't do that with DNA," or "That's not the way you do a telephone record search," or something like that. So I really try very hard to get all of the technical stuff, correct. I think one of the things that I can bring to a legal thriller that if you're not a lawyer and you haven't practiced law, you might not be able to do is I have been in the trenches. I have tried cases. I have done a lot of criminal defense work. And because all of these books are set in the state courts in New Jersey, I have those experiences as well. So I know how prosecutors in New Jersey and defense lawyers interact with each other. I know how a judge is going to handle a conference and the issues that might come up. And I also know like the little things that lawyers try to do to gain that edge. And that plays an important part in some of the things that Erin and Dwayne do in defending John Mazur, their client, as to try to play by the rules, which they do, but to the extent that they can get the rules to work in their favor, they're trying to do that as well. So again, to answer your question, I really try hard to get all of those things 100% accurate. And it's, again, because this is the fourth book and I've written Erin and Dwayne now over 4 books, I do feel like I know them. I feel like they're real people and they're my friends, and I know how they would interact with each other. And so I hope that kind of goes to what you were saying in terms of, the way they deal with each other. It's realistic, it's human. They have very different lived experiences, but they are bound to each other and the best of friends.
And that's encouraging as a reader, because you really do want to like your main characters. Obviously, the author wants me to like them. You want me to like them. I want to like them. So we're invested in it together. And you bring such a wonderful thing. I do want to mention, maybe nothing exactly specific, but the amount of negativity on the opposite end, the amount of things that go on in your book are a little staggering in some ways. The amount of discrimination that we see, we all know, because enlightened humans realizes discrimination exists. But I mean, you bring us several puzzles within a puzzle, Robyn, that it's like, holy cow, this is crazy. And yet at the same time, you balance that with the love and beauty of almost some romance stories on the side amongst these people wanting to be parents. I mean, the good guys wanting to be even better. So what was that important to you to try to make sure there was an equal balance between the good and the bad, the dark and the light?
It was, Dan. I think so many, trans stories, come from a place of pain and sorrow. And you're dealing with the issues of transphobia and all those things. And those are real and those exist and they're in the books. But I also wanted to present the story of people who have stood by, in this case, Erin, her family, a boyfriend that she has, Dwayne, her extended family in terms of her brother, sister-in-law, nephews, who have all stood by her, because I think it's important to also try to present the positive in terms of trans lives and not just always dwell on the negative, that there can be happy outcomes, that you can live a great fulfilled life and be a trans person. And so, yes, I definitely strove for that positivity because I think it's important. I don't necessarily write for a trans audience. I write for people who like legal thrillers. But, there's nothing more satisfying to me than to get an email from somebody, be they cis or trans, just to say, you've helped me. Whether it's the trans person, you've given me hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel,
Sure.
Or the cis person who says, I didn't understand this before, but you humanized it for me.
And I love that. I think that's one of the things about this book that is so inspiring. I mean, I love intelligence. I do. To me, it's sexy. So here is Erin and Dwayne both, but let's talk about Erin a little bit. Erin is very intelligent. She knows what she's doing. She knows her way around the courtroom, as you say. She knows her way around defending a client. And that to me is very sexy, because what we get to see is a human being who happens to be trans. But as I said, I just think intelligence is so sexy. So, I mean, Erin brings everything to this role. She's on her game. But I will say that you as an author gave us, the readers, some, oh my God, I cannot believe Erin's having to go through this. And we saw some things that, because I don't want to give any of it away, but there were some things that I had never thought of. I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting concept. And could you really do this? And then I'm like, well, yes, you could do this. And then, of course, you torture her with it, Robyn. That's just not nice of you. You're not a nice person, Robyn Gigl.
I think I know what you're talking about, Dan. And again, we don't want to give any spoilers, but, look, I am a trans woman. People ask me all the time, is Erin me? And I always say no. Erin's half my age. She's young, attracted to men, or bisexual, actually. And so Erin is not me, but I do put a lot of my feelings and experiences into Erin. And one of those, lived experiences, and I don't know that it's true for every trans person, but certainly it was true for me, that feeling of insecurity in terms of who you are and how the world sees you, and will you be accepted as you are. And so in terms of Erin's personal life, and the things that go on, and the way that internal struggle that she has in terms of, people are going to suffer because of me and I don't want that. Those are all real feelings, at least for me. And I gave them to Erin. In terms of just answering your question and leaving it very vague, everything that goes on in here in terms of Erin's personal life is real. Didn't happen to me, but it's real. It's factual. I know people that have this experience. So, for when people read the book, if they're going, oh, now I know what Dan was talking about, I didn't make anything up. I made it probably look easier than it is. And there's a section in the acknowledgments where I talk about that, because I'm writing a legal thriller. I'm not writing about relationships within the LGBTQ plus community. That's not what the book is about, although it's a subplot. And so I couldn't spend hundreds of pages describing certain things and the failures and the pain and everything that goes along with that. But it is real, and it has happened.
Wow. I will tell you, it was eye-opening. And it is yet once again a reason we want to root for Erin. I mean, as I said earlier, you give Erin so many hurdles to get across, but we want to be back there rooting and pushing. Come on, let's get across one more hurdle, because this is something for your good. And of course, what you do, as I said earlier, with the secondary characters is you give them such a support system that is just beyond amazing. And we really hope every human has a support system like that. We know it doesn't always happen, but anytime you get to read about it, as I said, you want Erin to succeed, so you want to root for her.
Yeah, and as I told you off camera earlier, Dan, I mean, I have been incredibly blessed, and I have been incredibly privileged in my life. So I wanted people to see that, there are families that are accepting. Peg McCabe, Erin's mom in the book, is modeled after my own mom, who, passed away in 2000, or 2020, I'm sorry, but who struggled with me, but then came to accept me because I'm her child. And we had a better relationship after I transitioned than we did before. And we had a great relationship before. So I wanted, again, people to see that there are families that stick together, that there are families that support each other through all kinds of things. And so I wanted to share those blessings with people.
And you did indeed, and I love that. So one of the things that I was struck about was the title, Nothing But the Truth. And I think everyone would know that you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. However, one of the things that you did so well is you gave us so many characters who didn't tell the truth and had no problem living in their lie. And I have a client who will remain nameless, but I have often said about her, and she's someone I really like, but I say she wouldn't know what the truth was if it was standing next to her. She just tells whatever tale she wants to tell in that moment, whether it's true or not. She cares less about it. And I find that in real life, my client is not the only person on this earth that does that. And so I love the fact that you created a whole bunch of characters who were never standing next to the truth. They didn't even understand what the word meant. How fun was that for you? And a follow-up question. So when you're in court and you know someone's lying, what does that do to you as an attorney? So there are your two questions, Robyn.
Well, I'm going to take the second one and twist it just a little bit. I do a lot of civil work too. And in civil work, you take depositions of people, which is, they're sworn in, they're supposed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But it's in a very informal setting in somebody's office. And the toughest deposition I ever took in my life was of a witness who, just like your client, had no compunctions about lying. And you could catch him in a lie and say, but you just said this 10 minutes ago. And he'd say, well, no, it's this. And when someone is lying and you don't have that one thing that is going to, say, here it is, you're lying, it can be very difficult. And as for people who read the book, there's, one of the characters, he knows he's going to lie, and he's told not to lie. And yet he does it because he thinks he's protecting somebody else. And that lie comes back to bite him. And so, it happens with more frequency than we'd want. We can look at our current political situation and see people who have trouble with the truth. Um,
Yes.
no names, just throwing things.
Everybody knows who that is as well. So, or who they are, because it's not just one; it's a whole bunch of them. So.
Yeah, but it makes things much harder in life, and it's hard to expose those lies. In terms of, did I have fun doing it as I was writing it? Of course I did.
Good. I love that. I love that answer, because
It is so much fun to write I'm going to say bad guys, but that's a generic term. It
right.
could be bad women, bad men, bad non-binary people. But I mean, it's so good to get into their heads and let yourself it's like being in a sauna. You just letting it soak in, and you go, oh yeah, I can be evil, I can be mean, I can. So it's fun.
And something I heard not so long ago, it certainly is something I heard from someone else, but even the bad guy believes he's the hero of his own life, or bad woman, whichever one it is. So
yep.
You mentioned it earlier, and I did a little Google search myself on it, because I remember when the federal government stepped in to help the New Jersey State Police. And then I noticed from reading that there've been all these articles published in all these journals in-house stuff for here are the rules to follow. And then I see that just very recently, the Attorney General has come out with another proclamation, or whatever you want to call it, report, study, saying, all of these things we've implemented, nobody's been, following the rules or overlooking it. And it may be worse now than it was before. And it's sort of like, we have to still be vigilant in this life, because driving while black, or discrimination as a whole, is still here. It hasn't gone away. And I think to myself that, maybe something like Nothing But the Truth will open some people's eyes to being reminded that we have to be better as humanity.
I agree, Dan. And for people who haven't read any of the books, the first book in Erin's series, Nothing But By Way of Sorrow, was set in 2006, 2007, and I kind of follow the timeline. And Nothing But the Truth is set in 2010. And I had mentioned earlier about having that brunch, and the state trooper telling me, look up the Lords of Discipline. Well, I mean, that was all happening within the time frame of the book. It was 2007, 2008 that there was these investigations and everything else. So it fit perfectly within the timeline of the story I was telling. But I was writing it, and in terms of what you just mentioned, the AG coming out and saying things are just as bad, if not worse. I mean, it's such a sad story in the sense that we haven't corrected anything. But from an author's standpoint, and this is probably a terrible thing to say, it still makes my book timely, because I'm dealing with a present day issue, even though it's existed for the last, I mean, if I remember correctly, the Department of Justice first went in against the New Jersey State Police sometime in the 1990s, maybe the 80s. And so here we are, 30, 40 years later with the same issues. And I mean, one of the things that, exists in New Jersey, as it does in a lot of places, is people who are pulled over simply because they're a person of color, and being profiled. And racial profiling was attacked by the Department of Justice decades ago, and yet it still exists.
It still exists. And I recognize my privilege as well, and I'm thankful for it. I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone else, but when I see an automobile pulled over on the freeway or a side street here in Los Angeles, I almost always look to see the color of the person's skin. And I can tell you that someone who's blonde and fair skinned like I am is rarely the person being pulled over, unless they're driving some huge expensive car and they're going 90 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. The majority of people who are pulled over are black and brown people. And I recognize that. And I realize that we still have a long ways to go.
We do.
Hopefully a little by little it gets better, but not quick enough. That's for sure.
Yeah. we seem to take one step forward and two steps back. I mean, where we are in this country, just kind of harkening back when I started to write by way of sorrow, it was 2015. And in terms of LGBTQ plus issues, we were in a very different place. I mean, Obama was president. He had just mentioned LGBTQ in the State of the Union. I was like, oh, nobody's going to want to read a book about a trans, criminal defense attorney. We're in a good place. We're on a good trajectory. And here we are in 2024, and things are worse than they have been probably in my lifetime in terms of LGBTQ plus issues. Well, I shouldn't say that. We made progress, but we seem to be going backwards.
We have made progress, thank goodness, but there's progress still to be made. Yes. And I think that nothing but the truth is timely, and it's important, it's relevant, for all the right reasons and perhaps some of the wrong reasons, but for all of the right reasons, it's timely and important. So, Robyn, do you have a website or social media you would like to share?
First, thank you, Dan, for those wonderful compliments. I really appreciate it. In terms of anything with me, because my name's a little bit unusual, my website is robingigl.com. My Instagram is at Robyn Gigl. My X is at Robyn Gigl. So, it's an unusual name, allows me to keep it and use it for all my contact stuff.
So I am curious, Gigl is, what nationality is that? Is it Irish?
It's actually German-Austrian.
Okay. All right. You're the first Gigl I know, so I'm very lucky. Thank you, Robyn, for being in my life.
Well, thank you, Dan. I always know when people know me because they pronounce my name right.
I hear you. Robyn, thank you so much for being here. This was such a wonderful time.
Thank you, Dan. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.